So, the goddamn amazing digital circus. So initially I had literally like an entire video recorded for my thoughts on the finale. I had this whole like 40 to 50 minute video lined up where I went into detail about like what happened in the movie and exactly my thoughts on it, all the things I had a problem with leading up to the finale in terms of pacing, episode count, characterization, lack thereof really. But then this interesting weird controversy happened with Jax. And I had figured maybe I should just talk about this instead of the finale because there's already everybody talking about their thoughts on the finale in general. And they all pretty much have the same things to say about it as I do. The finale, as just an episode itself, I thought was pretty good actually, like really good. But as a finale to the show, I couldn't tell you what they were cooking. They were cooking straight poison. And I just want to get this out of the way. As an episode itself, I thought it was great because of the character focus that it had, and it was very honest and grueling, and I really appreciated that. And there are a lot of people saying like, yeah, it's a finale. Of course it's going to focus on its main characters a lot. And it's like, yeah, but only Jax. Like, the other characters don't really have much characterization to them even, and even the ones that sort of kind of do, Jax does better. For example, Ragatha, we saw that her like whole trauma was related to like her abusive mother, potentially physically abusive, but most definitely at least like mentally abusive, at least a very toxic influence on Ragatha, which we then see is also the case with Jax, only his is more fleshed out, like infinitely more fleshed out. Same with Zubul. Zubul's conflict relies within their gender identity and gender dysphoria. And Zubul is kind of like the other side of the coin, where they're a good representation on how to handle your gender identity healthily, as Jax is the antithesis to that. So I can see the value in having Zubul there. But again, Jax is just another deeper, more fleshed out and complex version of Zubul's, I guess, trauma or inner conflict. So Jax was kind of just multiple characters rolled into one, only he did it better. So either they needed to add more depth and character to the other characters, or they needed to cut them, because there isn't really enough growth and characterization to pass around to justify the count of the cast. So I'm just going to jump in and say Jax abstracted off screen, which didn't sit right with me at first, but as the episode went on, it was more apparent that abstraction is essentially just like an allegory for suicide. Obviously, it's an allegory for death in some capacity, but it's more akin to like self-harm and suicide. We see this whenever Jax basically bullies like Ribbit and Kaufmo into abstracting, and we see Jax constantly refuse to better himself and change. And if you just swapped abstracting with like killing himself at the end when it got too rough and he figured he couldn't like move into the real world again, it makes sense that it's an allegory for like taking yourself out. And with that in mind, I thought it was kind of raw. I'm sorry, that was stupid. It kind of made sense for him to abstract off screen. And I had always had this little notion in my mind about this happening in a movie, because though it was uncharismatic and I guess unceremonious, for a lack of a better term, things like that happen in real life all the time. I mean, like, people just die for no reason even. It was obvious Jax was going to abstract, and it was even more obvious that he was going to get more screen time for it later, so I didn't mind. But I especially didn't mind exploring the fact that, unfortunately, people who commit suicide, they can seem fine one day, or maybe a little rocky, but still otherwise stable. And the next day, you just don't see them. That's what happens, unfortunately. And I thought it was kind of cool that they did that. However, the characters' reactions to it were just kind of like, eh. I feel like their reactions to anything in this show, especially to each other, are very underwhelming. And they try to paint it as though like they've been through a lot together and they're a newfound family, but they really have like negative chemistry with one another. Like whenever Pomni and Ragatha held each other in their arms and like the camera panned around them and there was like this glowing light between them that represented like their love and care for one another, I felt nothing because of how little chemistry any of these characters have with one another. And to add insult to injury, whenever Pomni and Ragatha were walking away from each other, there was like this 30-second lingering shot of them just like locking eyes. And I don't know what I was supposed to extrapolate from that because, again, there was like no chemistry there. I don't know anything about Pomni individually. I don't really know anything about Ragatha individually. I certainly don't know anything about both of them together. So, but anyways, as I said earlier, Jax basically bullies Ribbit into suicide. Now, the reason this is because he was vulnerable, emotionally vulnerable with her in her room, which was new for him, and he'd never done that, and then he had never done that since, really. So Ribbit opens up about her parents being really strict Mormons who essentially excommunicated her from their family because of this, because she wasn't Mormon, which is a story that happens pretty often in like really heavy like Mormon communities, which is fucking terrible. That shit's stupid. And so Jax is vulnerable with her in return, and he essentially tells her about his parents, how the night that he left and found the headset, he was homeless because he had pushed his mother back because she hugged him after daring to laugh at him for something personal that she told him. Or, excuse me, something personal that he told her. I'm going to keep referring to Jax as a he, and I'll explain why later. Jax also opens up about his father being more or less the same as his mom, just more outright like rude and toxic. He basically instilled within Jax these toxic notions of what it means to be a man and masculinity. Basically, just like, for example, looking at him crying and saying, "Oh, what? You're so weak. You gonna cry? You gonna cry right now?" Just stuff like that, and it really feeds into like how he treats women as a whole. And in my mind, it's pretty obvious that the thing he confided within his mother about was that he's transgender. Now, a lot of the internet somehow doesn't grasp that, and if they're educated on the fact that Jax indeed is transgender, they just outright deny it. And let me tell you folks, I'm not queer. I'm straight. I'm cisgender. I'm a cishet man. This gets me, like, infuriated. Not only do straight people in the fandom constantly deny that Jax is trans, there are also a great deal of queer people who also do not believe this. I found a few Instagram videos where there was just like chains in the comment section of trans men basically just saying like, no, this is not how being transgender works, number one, and number two, I don't feel like they did it well enough. So as a trans person, I don't really think that they're trans, which is kind of insane if you're going to need like a cishet man to step up to bat for the fact that Jax is transgender, because there are a lot of trans fans that simply just either don't recognize it or don't even care to accept it. So let me just go ahead and bring up some points on why I think Jax is obviously transgender. Number one, I think the most obvious one is him wearing a maid dress. Now you're probably thinking like, oh, well, he's uncomfortable wearing the maid dress because he's a boy and he doesn't like wearing dresses, haha. That's not how that works. Now, the reason Jax is uncomfortable with the maid dress is because he feels like he's being called out or exposed. They put the maid dress on him as like a little joke or a slight against him, but really he likes that. That's where he wants to be. And so he sees this and he basically just acts like he absolutely does not want to wear it. Absolutely no way, no how. But we see literally in his mindscape later on how sarcastic he is when he goes, oh, I'm just wearing this maid dress. Ironically, I actually don't like it. And then he calls himself the F-slur. So it's pretty obvious there's something to do with his gender orientation in that. He feels insecure in it because he's not confident enough to own it, which also bleeds into how he treats women. He's shown to be pretty sexist and like misogynistic within the last episode, getting annoyed by women. This is because he can't accept himself as a woman, so he can't accept other women, and obviously plays hand in hand with the toxic notions that his father gave him of masculinity growing up. And then also, Jax, I forget the exact quote, but he was basically, I believe, talking to Pomni, and he said, like, what, you think I'm just some misunderstood chicken fetus in an egg waiting to be cracked open? And if you didn't know, egg is actually like a term for trans people that don't know they're trans or haven't come out yet. So obviously him just saying that is like not literal confirmation that he is transgender, but it's like a double entendre essentially. There's also this scene in Jax's like Mindscape, Mind Palace thing where there's this door that's like locked and like barred, like Call of Duty zombie style, and there's like noise coming out from there, and every other one of his consciousness yells at the door to shut up. To me, this kind of just obviously represents like suppression. Like every other aspect and part about his personality is suppressing this one huge thing, being kept away deliberately and locked up. I feel like that's pretty obvious. Not only that, there's a flashback whenever Pomni is pulled out from trying to unabstract Jax. We get a little montage of Jax to a cover of Stevie Wonder's Isn't She Lovely? Now, a couple things I want to say. First of all, I did not know Jobby the Hong covered this. That's crazy. For those who don't know, and you're only in the Amazing Digital Circus fandom, Jobby the Hong voices Disappearing Guy. Jobby the Hong is like a YouTuber, and he does like a bunch of toy reviews. But like he makes them like actually like funny and entertaining. I don't actually watch unboxing or like toy review videos. The only ones I do watch are Jobby the Hongs, and they're funny as fuck. And it was crazy seeing him as Disappearing Guy. But yeah, if you don't know who that is, Disappearing Guy did the cover for Isn't She Lovely? Which is cool because I didn't notice it was him because he usually does covers of like jazz songs, which is not the style of that song. So I wasn't expecting it, but that's cool. Number 2, there were really people online still going down the path of Jax is not transgender. And so basically people were asking like, well, then how do you justify the usage of Isn't She Lovely over the montage of Jax? And somebody literally said, well, I think that was of Pomni. What does that mean? What do you mean? You thought that was of Pomni? It showed a montage specifically of Jax after a Jax-oriented... It's annoying. Not only this, but Jax's IRL counterpart, who I believe is named Leroy, which, yikes. Leroy is shown to actually visit IRL Zubal's bar all the time, and we already know that A, Zubal is non-binary, and B, Zubal seems to have opened up that place specifically for more alternative lifestyles, I guess we'll say, so it's implied that it's a safe space for queer people. And I just want to go on a small side tangent. I hated how they actually showed Jax in the real world living his life, because I feel like that completely deflates the entire core of the episode, where Jax and the circus just failed to change all the time, made every single wrong decision he could in his life, and ended up basically killing himself. Then we cut to him in the real world, and we see that he's a UPS driver, and he's like petting a dog, I think it was, and then now he's like in like a queer safe space bar, and that's just such like a leap in logic to me, because I feel like if this is like a literal brain scan of the same person in the real world, I feel like he should be suffering the same consequences and the same mental disparities that he is in the circus. The only difference is he's in a digital world versus the real world, and I feel like his personhood would largely be the same, and he would be repeating the same toxic behaviors that he is in the circus. But anyways, not only that, Gooseworks posted a photo that she drew of Jax as a woman, and she has long hair, and she even outright says that she uses she/her pronouns. But Gooseworks also says that she doesn't mind any pronouns that you use for Jax, which is why I'm still calling Jax a he/him. Not only that, but I feel like it's really fitting for his character. Jax is a trans woman, however, gendered pronouns don't really equate to just like gender identity. Jax is a trans woman, but he obviously hasn't come out to anybody, and he's not comfortable enough to use she/her pronouns. And that's kind of the tragedy of his character, is he never got to come out to anybody, even himself. He doesn't get to live a peaceful life or peacefully transition. He doesn't get to be true to himself, therefore he's not true to others. He doesn't accept himself, so he doesn't accept others. He's rude to others, he's misogynistic, he's mean to women, he's an all-around terrible person. And you could say that, oh, well, he would have transitioned, so you should use she/her pronouns because he would be a girl, but you can't make that decision for him. Sure, he could be a girl, he would be a girl, he would come out, he would do this, he would do that, but he didn't. He was given the life that he was given. He was given the time on the earth and in the circus that he was given, and he squandered all of it and made all the wrong decisions at all the wrong turns. So no, he doesn't get the happy ending or the satisfaction of being called she/her and transitioning. And that's the point of the character. That's the tragedy, and that's what makes it so enthralling and interesting to me, is this was basically a textbook like definition on exactly what not to do. Which also then leads into discourse I saw on Instagram again, where people were saying there was this one chick. She's actually a pretty well-known artist. I will omit her name though, and just tell you what she said. She said that they didn't do anything with Jax being transgender, and she really would have liked it if we at least got Ribbit calling her she/her pronouns. And I just have to say to that exactly what I said 2 seconds ago, where that's the entire point of his character. He's not supposed to be able to get to that point because he doesn't deserve it, and he didn't do the work to put into himself. So he doesn't get to reap the benefits of that. So there's this post. It says, "Hot take. Jax being hinted to be trans femme could have been done a lot better and made more integral to the character arc. Could have been done a lot better and made more integral to the character arc. The entire character arc for that episode was exploring Jax's psyche and his relationship with his identity. There were breadcrumbs the entire time Jax was in an episode in the series, to where people complain that Jax it's basically the Jax show. It's not the Amazing Digital Circus, it's the Jax show, which I completely agree with. He's a person that got the most characterization, the most emphasis on his actions, and if you actually pay attention, like I mentioned earlier, him saying, I'm not some chicken fetus in an egg to be cracked open. He treats women terribly. He's uncomfortable with the maid dress. In fact, it was so obvious that people actually were guessing that Jax was trans femme a couple episodes before the finale. So already I feel like you kind of just weren't thinking about it. Now it says, a pink bow does not equal trans. A corny song does not equal trans. Misogyny does not equal trans. A maid outfit does not equal trans. Having long hair does not equal trans. I feel like the point they're missing is that many trans women tend to adopt these traits because it is what is prescribed as stereotypically feminine. It's just like the prototype for a woman. And if you resonate more with women and womanhood, then you are likely to adopt the traits of so-called womanhood that our society prescribes. So no, having a pink bow does not automatically equal trans, or misogyny, or, maid outfits, or having long hair. But having long hair, dresses, pink bows, those are all largely associated with feminine clothing, so a lot of people who want to go out of their way to adopt the gender that seems more feminine will probably go out of their way to dress more feminine as well. Also, misogyny does not equal trans. Again, I feel like they're not even thinking about it or reading between the lines. It's not the fact that he's misogynistic makes him transgender. It's where it comes from and why he is being misogynistic. It's because his parents have told him from a young age that he has to act a man, he can't cry. Not only does his father probably perpetuate misogynistic stereotypes and notions, but also Jax himself does so, as he's not accepting himself as a woman, therefore he takes it out on other women around him. And also, corny song does not equal trans. First of all, corny song, that's Stevie Wonder covered by Jobby the Hong. That's fucking epic. Number two, corny song does not equal transgender. Pay attention to the lyrics. Isn't she lovely? And it's Jax on screen the whole time, and it's right after we got the bombshell that he transitioned pretty much, or wants to transition. So the problem with this post is that they're taking all of these small little components out and separating it from its context and then saying this does not equal that. When all of these separately, yes, does not equal something inherently. But when you put all of these pieces together within a framework that it's obviously supposed to portray, well, then it becomes pretty apparent that it is supposed to be an allegory for being transgender. Not only that, but there was a separate person under a comment section that said, they basically said that Jax being transgender wasn't outright said. The person commenting said that Jax being transgender wasn't actually said and that they weren't using she/her pronouns. Therefore, Jax is not transgender. And I just want to say, what an incredibly boring experience watching movies and reading books and watching shows must be if you need people inside whatever media you're consuming to outright say to the audience what exactly to think and what is going on. There's this thing called media literacy, and I know I probably sound like a pretentious, mustache-curling, wine-drinking, student film major, right? I feel like everybody brings up the term media literacy now, but it's true. It may be overused, it may be over-talked about, I guess you could say, but it's true. And I'm not saying you're stupid if you don't get it or anything like that, but I think refuting it when the creator is telling you exactly what their intention was after you've already watched whatever they're making, and telling them that this is not what happened because X amount of characters did not tell you exactly what to think, and then the creator tells you exactly what to think, and you're still like, no, I don't think that's what happened. There's somebody that said Jax being transgender is just the creator's headcanon, which, what does that mean? Do you mean canon? The creator's headcanon? I think that is just canon. And people are right. Jax being transgender or whatever is in the show should be able to exist as a standalone idea and execution, and the creator shouldn't have to go on Twitter and tweet out like a picture or confirmation about a theory to let the audience know that they were correct. But that's not what happened. Yes, Gooseworks posted on Twitter confirming that Jax is indeed transgender and you can use any pronouns for them, but there was very obvious, I'm reluctant to call it subtext because it was really just like basic context clues. Context clues that were later confirmed in the movie. And no, Pomni didn't hug Jax and say, oh my god, you're transgender. Obviously not. But you should be able to read into things and think about things and what they mean in the overall grand scheme of things or within that person's character arc. For example, we know that Zubul has gender dysphoria. Do they ever outright say, hey guys, I'm uncomfortable with my body and I have gender dysphoria? No, of course not, but we can see through symbolism and context clues that that's exactly the case. For example, whenever Cain was putting everybody through their own like special little torture, Zubul was drowning in a sea of their own body parts surrounded by mirrors. That's a very, very obvious symbolism for essentially having so much to choose from that you feel like you're drowning in freedom in terms of how to express yourself. And as Zubul later says later within the show, it kind of feels good not being able to, not needing to commit to something and they're able to just like switch out their body parts for whatever. So they're not really feeling confined to one thing or the other. Again, symbolism for being non-binary, and finally accepting that they can just do whatever the hell they want. My point is, the subtext for Jax being transgender is very clearly there, and I feel like anybody refuting the fact that he is transgender, especially confirmed by Gooseworks, I feel like is either just on a high horse and pretending like they know better than the creator, or some of them are probably just transphobic, which is strange again because you have a couple camps, right? You have somehow transphobic fans of the Amazing Digital Circus. How does that happen? And then in the second camp, you have transgender people themselves saying, no, this is not how it is, Skip. And they just completely deny the fact that Jax is transgender. And by the way, if you want my opinion on like how Jax's character ended up, I really enjoyed it, and I was actually enthralled by what they had to offer for his character the entire episode. Now, the entire episode, I was rolling my eyes because I knew it was the finale, and what a waste of a finale, right? Only focusing on this one side character who is being abstracted. However, I feel like they did a really good job sprinkling these breadcrumbs and clues and notions throughout the entire series leading up to it. There was a lot of setup, and then a big payoff, and it was great. I liked it a lot, and I'm so thankful that there is queer representation that isn't just like super cute, innocent, uwu, you know what I mean? Like, a lot of the times when there's like gay or trans characters in media, they're often written to be trans and gay characters and not just characters that happen to be this identity and this orientation. So they're usually reduced sometimes to like stereotypes of like, oh my god, I'm so like quirky and cute, ooh. And so I'm glad that they were able to depict a very grueling interpretation of what it's like to be transgender and how you could get so deep into self-loathing that you end up taking it out on others. And that's not to say, obviously, that like all trans people are like that, or that's even like the majority of how trans people are, but that's a very specific type of transgender person, transgender woman, and it's basically telling you not to do this. And as my friend Grayson said, Jax is pretty much Gooseworks grabbing the audience by the shoulders and shaking them and saying, you are doing this to yourself by surrounding yourself with a shit ton of toxicity and unwillingness to change, and basically locking yourself in an echo chamber that you would end up turning into this. And I'm glad Jax was not redeemed. I'm glad he faced the consequences of his actions and was abstracted. And I'm glad that this was actually a transgender character that was capable of having so much depth to that and so many layers, and I thought it was actually handled pretty well. Now, obviously, I'm not transgender, but I went to go see this movie with two of my best friends that are transgender, and they actually liked it a lot. So, I mean, like, obviously, like, my opinion on, like, Jax being a good character or not is not going to be dependent on, like, if I'm transgender or not. Like, I don't have to be queer to appreciate this character or to give my opinion on it, whether I think it's, like, a good or bad thing that this character is the way that they are. I'm obviously going to have that opinion either way, but I am just saying that, like, I wasn't able to relate to any of it. However, I found it very moving and thought-provoking for sure. It's the first character I've ever seen written like that, so even though I really don't like this show, I personally enjoy this show. However, I have I would say many more gripes with it than I do appraisal. I can at least commend Gooseworks for having the balls to follow through with this, because there's certainly a lot of discourse both on people who like the thought of Jax being transgender and the people who don't, and they have a lot to say about it and a bunch of negative things to say about it. However, I pretty much have nothing but positive to say about that, which is probably the best thing I can say for this show. I like Gooseworks' other stuff, like their little cartoons and stuff, and I love the covers of songs. Like their Undertale album is pretty cool. And then also, of course, original music. I think she made the music for Hazbin Hotel in the pilot episode, which was cool. I'm a fan of what she does, and I think she's a pretty talented person. I'm just not so sure the Amazing Digital Circus is really the best representation of her work. However, like I said, if there's one thing I can say to Gooseworks, which I know she's not watching this video or anything like that, I can at least say thank you so much for giving us like a really well thought out, rounded out character, and for having the gall to have him face the consequences of his actions, reap what he's sown, and to not like explicitly tell the audience exactly what is happening. That's probably the best writing in the show, is Jax's character, and I'm just glad that there are people that actually picked up on the fact that he's transgender, and I'm kind of shocked that people are still denying it. Anyhow, though, I'm recording this video right before I'm playing Deltarune Chapter 5. This may come out in the same night, this may come out the day after, but basically, I got a split. I'm going to go play Chapter 5 for the first time. I just got off work, I just showered, I recorded this video. Time to go veg out, dude. Okay, thank you for watching, Superstar. I will see you later. Bye.